What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on? Happy college football playoffs. We're off and running. Well, kinda. Notre Dame is off and running, and Indiana came to a screeching halt. Do not let the final score fool you. Notre Dame destroys, works, absolutely mollywops Indiana. It was 27-3 with under 5 minutes to go. Somehow the final score, they scored. They actually converted a fantastic onside kick to get the second score, but Notre Dame is off to play Georgia. And the cute little story, Indiana, I think has officially ruined it for future cute little stories. Those days are over. So we will dive into this game. It's just going to be a quick recap. We'll be back again tomorrow after all three of the games. But, you know, I said I was watching this game, like I'm sure many of you and many people all over the country. Hell, my buddy Michael Titus was there. And if you want to go to a game like this, if you want to go to any game, Christmas, Hanukkah, get some presents right around the corner, the official ticketing app of this podcast has you covered. Concerts, games, you name it. You want a pair of tickets to any event, use Game Time. They're the best. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Well, I think we have to start tonight. You know, this obviously Notre Dame is one of the biggest brands in all of sports, college or pro. There's something powerful about the helmets. Just when you see that gold kind of shining in the light, how cool it was. And listen, before we get negative on anything, this playoff is awesome. This home field game at Penn State, at Notre Dame, at Ohio State, at Texas is badass. The only people that get kind of screwed are these teams with a bye because of the power of these New Year's Six bowls that they also don't get a home game. If I was commissioner or czar of this entire thing, I would figure out a way. One, I would expand it to 16 teams. And every single team, whether you play in the first round or get that home field bye, or the first round bye, you get a home game. That was very, very powerful. My buddy was there. He kept sending me pictures. It looked awesome. It's a special atmosphere. These college teams aren't used to getting home games in the middle of December, let alone late December or January 1st. So I'm pro Rose Bowl. I'm pro the Orange Bowl. Like, I like some of the bowls. We can save that till the semifinals. And I think we got to find a way to have this happen more often. Because game day leading up on campus with Saban there, dude's kicking the field goal with McAfee, the lead in for like 10 minutes before kickoff, the band playing. It was awesome. Like, sign me up. We're all on board with home playoff games. Now, before we get to Notre Dame and they get a big win, they're off to play Georgia. We will dive into their potential hopes, not just against Georgia, but for the rest of this tournament. One of the biggest stories all year was Indiana. And I think we have to separate two things because in a vacuum, their season was incredible. They won 11 games. Go to their Football Reference record page. They had never won double-digit games. They said at the beginning of the kickoff, no program in like Power 5 Division I history has had less success than Indiana. So what Cignetti and the program accomplished on a historic basketball program was awesome. I don't care who you're playing. You could be playing the Sisters of the Poor, the School of the Blind, Eastern Illinois, Nebraska, doesn't matter. You win 11 games at Indiana, that is awesome. And then I think we have to factor in we're in this college football playoffs. And we're not looking for cute stories. We're not looking for, this is awesome, let's give them a shot. We're looking for the best teams. And in the NFL, even if you play in a crappy division, you play another division from the other conference, and you also play another division from your own conference. So it's almost unavoidable that you're playing a handful of really good teams. And if you end up with 9 to 10 wins, or obviously more, it's impossible to not have a couple good wins on your schedule. Plus, everybody in the pros is, wait for it, a pro. And I think there's become this big disconnect because everyone views the SECs as like the football elites. You can't talk any sense into them. They just believe to their soul that they are dramatically better than everyone else. And based on recent history, the NFL draft, national championships, and success in the playoffs, I think it speaks for itself. But like we have lumped in the Big Ten with the SEC, almost like they are equals. Now, with the SEC adding Oregon, obviously that is a massive addition. One of the better programs in the country over the last 20 years. But on the whole, the teams Indiana was beating this year, no one cares that you destroyed Nebraska. Honestly. And listen, Cignetti is, I like big personalities in sports. They're fun to talk about. They're fun to watch. They create a lot of fun storylines. But football at that level and obviously the NFL level are extremely difficult. It's why I would say the two best NFL coaches of my adult life don't really talk that much shit when they're coaching about anyone else. Andy Reid and Bill Belichick. If anything, they're the opposite. They build you up. They could be playing a winless team. Belichick was classic for this. And if they're playing a really good team, they act like they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. And even in college, Saban was very careful with his words. Kirby, while very emotional, very hesitant to like shit on another program. Cignetti, coaching at Indiana, runs around like he's Bear Bryant meets Bill Walsh combined with Vince Lombardi. And I'll promise you this. Next year, I Googled their schedule. They're playing Penn State, Iowa, and Oregon on the road. These teams in that conference are going to be looking to beat the living crap out of him because he never shuts up. Great season. Incredible story. He had no business being in this game. He really didn't. And one thing we learned tonight, and I think anyone with a brain that has followed the sport, records aren't all equal. And trying to compare records in college football is kind of stupid. How could anyone compare Boise State's record of playing a Mountain West schedule to Ole Miss or South Carolina's records playing an SEC schedule? It's like comparing apples to cheeseburgers. In Indiana, through 95% of this game, they didn't have 150 yards of offense with 5 minutes left to go in this game. And Notre Dame's good, and who knows, maybe they could beat Georgia. But that's not exactly Lou Holtz's Notre Dame team. I would imagine this team's not as good as some of Brian Kelly's Notre Dame team. It's a good team, but that was JV versus varsity immediately. It reminded me a little bit of the Bears-Vikings game from Monday Night Football. I would say less than 10 minutes into actual play of the game, you knew right away they have no chance to win the game. And in games like this, I always laugh when people on social media was like, I can't believe he punted down 17 points. Like, guys, nothing he does matters. Absolutely nothing. It's like, they got a really good quarterback. Well, yeah, he looks good playing Minnesota at home in September. How does he look against Ohio State or Notre Dame? He looks like a guy, like his brother, probably headed to the CFL, and there's nothing wrong with that. Had a great season. You can make decent money in the CFL. But like when he plays real teams, doesn't look like a high-end college quarterback, let alone an NFL prospect. I like Mel Kiper. Having him 6 on your big board seems a little bold to me. And the team speed, the athletes. And that's what, when people that argue about the SEC are simply saying, on a weekly basis, even if we're playing a 7-win team, they got 3 or 4 guys on defense alone that are going to be drafted in the top 4 rounds. 2 defensive linemen, a linebacker, and a safety. And those guys are hitting our players on a snap-in, snap-out basis. That is different than playing a team with maybe one draftable player that's a right guard. It's not the same. And I think Indiana tonight, moving forward, will really impact teams. If it doesn't look like they've beaten anybody, no one's going to give a shit what your record is. You know why? Because it does not matter. And there has to be some level of eye test. Are they good enough? Do they have any chance to compete? right? Do they? It's much different in the NCAA tournament with college basketball because we allow 64 teams in. So even if you go, is this team really that good? Who cares? They're a 7 seed. When there's only 12 teams going, and obviously 5 teams because of automatic qualifiers get in, there aren't that many at-large bids. And everyone was making this big deal. It was like, how are we even discussing Alabama or South Carolina with their 3 losses or 2 losses or whatever? It's like, guys, just watch the talent on one team and watch the talent on the other team. I just looked at the top 25. And once you pass Indiana and you get out of the teams in the dance, Alabama, they're better than. Ole Miss is better. South Carolina is better. Missouri is better. They didn't play Illinois this year. I would bet on Illinois straight up against Indiana. Colorado, who's barely in the top 25, is a better team than Indiana simply because they have better players. Their quarterback, top 5 guy. Their best player, top 5 guy. They have 2 guys on their team that are top 5 draft picks. Easily could go number 1 and 2 in the draft. I'm watching Indiana like, do they got a guy going in the first 2 rounds? Meanwhile, Notre Dame, they have a rotational pass rusher, Bryant Young, who is a special place in my heart because when I was a kid, the 49ers could not beat the Cowboys. And then in 1994, they drafted a defensive tackle from from Notre Dame. And he came, and his name was Bryant Young, and now his son's at Notre Dame. And he's 6'7" and comes off the edge. You're like, holy shit, that guy's got a chance to be a first rounder. I promise you that. He'd get drafted right now just off his measurables. It's like, you think Indiana has a guy like that on their team? Let alone all the starters, all the stalwarts for this, program the last couple years. Notre Dame every single year is pumping guys into the league. Indiana is the worst program in the history of college football. It's the most wonderful time of year for getting in on all the hoops, football, and hockey action at the DraftKings Sportsbook. It's the season of giving, and we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too, almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple, like picking a team to win. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. When you bet, just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. And this is why, it's like, how can we look at what's happened in previous years? Now, obviously, that has become more difficult with the transfer portal, with the movement. But if like this program every year is pumping out X number of players in the top 3 rounds to the NFL draft, that has to matter. Because this game, especially college football, it's about the X's and the O's. But on Saturdays, it's a lot about the Jimmies and the Joes. And how many guys on Indiana would start for Notre Dame? And it's not like I'm balls deep into every single roster in college football. But I can watch a couple games. I can watch Indiana play 4 games. I can watch Notre Dame play 4 games and have a pretty good idea. I would imagine everyone sitting on their couch goes, yeah, they maybe got a couple guys. So out of the 22 starters, how many of the 22 guys on Indiana would go to Notre Dame, who is probably like, we're going to find out against Georgia, a fringe top 10, 8 team in the country? I think if you're being aggressive, you would say 5. Probably have a couple defensive linemen. They clearly have a solid defense. Offensively, can't be many. And if you're being conservative, you can say like 2 or 3. That's an enormous talent discrepancy. And what we just had to witness was because like they factored in, and Sean McDonough, and I'll give him credit, in slow games, and he used to do this on Monday Night Football, he can turn the broadcast into a podcast. And he can just start slinging takes. And he essentially, I thought, summed it up perfectly. Like, we need to stop assuming there are 2 power conferences, right? Because in the last 20 years, there's been 1, and that's the SEC. That doesn't mean on given years the Big Ten is not really good. Last year's a good example. At their peak, like Ohio State and Michigan can go toe-to-toe with anybody. But this year, like, We'll find out. They got potentially two really good teams, maybe three, but let's not act like they go five, six deep. And their middle and their bottom is simply not nearly as good as the middle of the SEC when it comes to talent on the roster. So being 7-5 in the SEC and being 7-5 in the Big Ten, those are not equals. Just like going 9-3 in the Mountain West and going 6-6 in the SEC, it doesn't mean just because a team's got 9 wins, it's way more impressive than going 6-6. We're playing we're hiking two different mountains here. One person's hiking Everest, the other guy's hiking the hill in their backyard. That doesn't mean that playing football is not hard. That doesn't mean that Indiana shouldn't be proud of their season. But I think we learned a lesson really quick. Indiana had no business being in this dance. None. And that was as easy of a game as they could have. They had a fucking bus ride to the stadium. And they got mollywopped. That was embarrassing. You look at, if you didn't watch the game, you look at the final score, you're like, oh, probably a decent game. No, it was terrible. It was awful. It was really, really bad. And I don't think Indiana should be embarrassed. They are who they are. They played two good teams and they got worked in both of them. And all of us, because there was so much hype leading in because they had created this like fraudulent standing, we kind of were like, so could something happen? And then obviously nothing did. And on the flip side, Notre Dame, like, if this was the NFL and let's say they were in the AFC and they had a couple home games or every team they were going to play was going to be in cold weather, I'd say they could beat a lot of teams. I'd say, honestly, they could compete for a national championship. I'm not saying they could win it, but what they do well does work. They have two really good running backs. They ran for, I think, almost 200 yards tonight. Now, one of the runs, he actually took the handoff like 2 yards deep, but it was a 98-yard run. But he ran like 104 yards. It was sweet. But they're going to be able to should be able to run for 100 yards against good teams or just have some success on the ground. And defensively, they're really good. They have a really good defensive line. Obviously, they got feisty DBs. They're well coached. They're physical. They're tough. Like, that translates. And in games in the teens or the 20s where it's hard to throw the ball around, I would say they have a very good chance. The problem is their next game is in New Orleans in a dome against Georgia. So it does neutralize the strength. Obviously, they were playing, comparing Indiana to Georgia would be like comparing an NFL team to modern day high school in Southern California, who's obviously really good. But I was pretty impressed. I think they're pretty solid if they can play their way. Their one downfall is going to be, and there was a lot of hype on this player coming in, and he seems like an incredible guy. He's obviously a really tough motherfucker. You watch the way the guy competes. He's just a fantastic kind of playmaker, runner. Can he throw the ball well enough? And they obviously went all in on him. They paid him a lot of money. His numbers don't look terrible tonight. 23 of 32. Had a couple nice deep passes. Made some nice plays on the run, throwing the ball. I just don't know if he's going to be a good enough passer to beat the Georgia defense. Now, there's a big wild card. Kirby Smart was on game day and basically acknowledged, like, Carson Beck. In college football, unlike the pros, you don't have to there's no injury reports, so you can be very mysterious about what's going on. Like, did he get the Brock Purdy UCL injury? Is he out for the season? Is he not? Kirby Smart essentially, I would say, acknowledged, like, yeah, he's gone. He's not here anymore. Like, his season's over. We'll find out more and more as we get closer to the combine, like what the hell's going on. Schefter and those guys, I'm sure, will break the news sooner than later. But playing a backup quarterback, you never know. Now, Indiana's defense is solid, and it's actually not bad at all. Georgia's defense is on a completely different level. And when they bring their A game, as we've seen, against Texas, they're going to be tough. So can Notre Dame run the ball effectively against them? Can they pass it well enough to just keep them honest? But that is a fantastic game. This tonight was underwhelming. I'm glad and happy that we all experienced the first night of the playoffs at Notre Dame. Felt cool, felt big. But Indiana playing a part in that was a little bit of a letdown. Georgia Notre Dame is a fantastic game on paper. I also think it's a big game for Notre Dame, right? I would say in the Brian Kelly era up until this upcoming game, they've had some of these moments, and it felt like they've come up a little short. This would be as big of a win as I can remember to beat Kirby Smart, to beat Georgia. Obviously, Georgia gets the extra rest, even with the backup quarterback. I mean, Georgia's got three or four guys on defense that are going to go, I don't know, in the top 30 picks. And Notre Dame, I was impressed because the toughness, the defense, the running game, Love's run was sweet. The crazy thing is he had a 98-yard run and he had 108 yards total on 8 carries. So it's always good. I thought McElroy had a good point. He's like, coaches love doing, if you just take out that one run, we did a pretty good job, right? If you remove that one run, Notre Dame actually ran for under 100 yards, but that's not the way it works, right? It's like, no, that run actually happened, and that was 7 points. And that's part of the total. It's like, well, if we just didn't have the two go routes that Randy Moss took for a total of 140 yards, we would have done pretty well on defense. Well, those two things happened. So I'm fired up for that game already. I came in, actually parlayed Notre Dame tonight with the three games tomorrow. I took Penn State. I took Clemson money line, and I took Tennessee. I think I took Tennessee in the points. Also, I got a little bold. I had like $100 left. I think I also threw the Texans plus 3.5. So we got a long way to go, but we're one down, four to go. But nice win for Notre Dame. Cool moment in Indiana. Nice knowing you. I would say if you go 6-6 next year, I'd be impressed.